Welcome once again to the IDP Advice Show, the IDP Plus Advice Show. Today we're going to talk about IDP veteran losers post the NFL draft. So which IDPs were impacted by the NFL draft in a bad way? That's what we're going to talk about that. And let's go ahead and get started. All righty, welcome back. I am your host, Ricky Rodrigue. You can find me on X at RickyRod66. Thrilled to be back with you today once again to talk about IDP veteran losers post the NFL draft. Now, we covered winners and losers for IDPs post free agency. You can go back and watch those shows because there's still some interesting info from there. There's a few other differences now after the rookies have been selected here in the NFL draft. Now, I'm going to focus primarily on starters and maybe backups that were previously very high draft picks, like first round draft picks. That's going to be the focus of these losers today. Let's go ahead and jump in and get started, folks. And we're going to start off with defensive tackles. And as a reminder, when I do a lot of these shows, and for those that may be new, I like to think of it from a very deep league perspective. So some of the names you can say, they won't be playing in my league. Well, some of these are really, really deep leagues, okay? And with defensive tackles and losers, I have 6 on the list, with the first one being Kevin Givens from the 49ers. They went very heavy on defense in the draft. First 5 picks were all on defense, almost all in front 7, except for Upton Style, a cornerback / slot type of defensive back. But from a defensive line perspective, Alfred Collins out of University of Texas, C.J. West out of Indiana were both selected by the 49ers. So right now, I expect Jordan Elliott and Kevin Givens to start. I expect as the year progresses, either Collins or West to leapfrog Givens. And then a year from now, as we go to year 2, both Collins and CJ West starting ahead of Kevin Givens. Number 5 on my list for loser defensive tackles, John Franklin Myers with the Denver Broncos. In the last year of his contract, problem number 1. Problem number 2 is they selected Savion Jones, who was played at LSU, actually did very well in the Senior Bowl, but for some reason didn't get the notoriety coming out of it that I saw while I was watching a lot of the highlights and shows coming from the Senior Bowl. So Savion Jones will be John Franklin Myers' replacement a year from now. So bad news for John Franklin Myers. Larry Ogunjobi, formerly of the Steelers, they released him here in the offseason, signed with the Bills, and then, of course, shortly after his signing, they announced that he has a 6-game suspension. Well, the Bills already had Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones, that second-year player Dwayne Carter, who they're very high on coming back this year. Then with the suspension, they decided to go ahead and also add T.J. Sanders, who's an excellent interior gap penetrator, for lack of a better term, but he can all hold his own against the run. And Deone Walker, the big defensive tackle out of Kentucky, who played with a hurt back this year, which I really think hurt his draft ranking, where he ended up falling in the draft. And I think he has a lot more upside as well. So Ogunjobi will be suspended, but when he comes back, I'm not so sure how much playing time he's going to get. Number 3 on the loser list for defensive tackles, Grady Jarrett. Falcons let him go in a cost-cutting move. Bears signed him right away, basically the same day. But then the Bears do come back and also sign draft Shamar Turner, who they're very high on. On top of that, Chris Williams also demonstrated really well as the year progressed, and he was someone they picked up as a free agent. Very pleased with what he did. Andrew Billings coming back from injury. Grady Jarrett, while there was some excitement about him signing with the Bears, he's also over 30. He's our next loser here on the defensive tackle list. On the number 2 loser list for defensive tackles. I just grouped that as the Cardinals interior defensive lineman. If you listened to my last show when I talked about monkey tiers, if you didn't, go to the YouTube Plus channel for a YouTube channel for IDP Plus, and you can go and hear that show, my tiers for the rookies. You heard me talk about this regarding Walter Nolan, who I love Walter Nolan, the player, but unfortunately the Cardinals made a very concerted effort, both in the interior line and on the edges, to add more depth, both in free agency and from a rookie perspective. So if you look at an interior defensive line with Walter Nolan, Darius Robinson, the first round pick last year out of Missouri, Dalvin Tomlinson, the former Giant, and Brown, who's a very good run stuffer and gives you a little bit of push in the pocket. The venerable veteran Calais Campbell, who came over from Miami, started with Arizona, going to age 38 season, but still very productive. Justin Jones, who they signed as a free agent last year with Bears, but he got hurt, missed most of the year. Bilo Nichols, similar thing, signed as a free agent last year, but had some injury problems. Dante Stills, Elder Collier. So the Cardinals, there's just so many people. It's clear that there's going to be some sort of rotation. And with that rotation, it's going to be hard to get the snaps and thus the IDP stats out of any of these interior defensive linemen. So that's my number 2 on the list, the Cardinals interior defensive lineman. Number 1 for defensive tackle from a loser perspective. This one might surprise a lot of people, is Christian Wilkins. So I just saw some information that hasn't been overly publicized, but there's talk that Christian Wilkins, now it's talk, so I want to be very clear, I haven't seen the big names confirm this, that his foot that he had injured during the year is not progressing very well from a healing perspective, and he may need another procedure or his return could be delayed even further. As a result, as good as he is and as talented as he is, and the fact the the Raiders drafted both Tonka Hemingway as well as J.J. Pegues, 2 interior defensive linemen. Now, they could have used some help there regardless, but to me, that just adds a little bit of fuel to the fire in my mind. So Christian Wilkins, number 1 on my defensive tackle loser list, unless we hear differently that these are just rumors and his foot is fine and he'll be ready for the start of the year. But a little bit concerned about that. Okay, let's quick advertisement before we go into the edges. Number 1, Fast Draft app, the Fast Draft app. If you haven't tried it out, it's a lot of fun and it is a fast draft. So with a first-time deposit up to $50, you can get up to a $50 match using the code PLUS. Deposit $50, get $50 matched. Deposit $25, you get $25. Use the code PLUS. Number 2, be sure and check out idpplus.com. Great content, great tools, great rankings, Discord channel to help you out. Come join the IDP Plus family. Number 3, the Fantasy Football Expo. Get your 2025 tickets at the website. The website is thefantasyfootballexpo.com. The word "the" is in the front of fantasyfootball.com. August 8th through 10th at the home of the Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. There's some brand new fan packages you're going to want to check out, and gives you a chance to compete to be in drafts with some of the more famous people in the fantasy football industry. Get a chance to meet them as well. Lots of cool things with these fan packages. And of course, checking out the Hall of Fame is fantastic as well. So come and meet. I'll be there as well. Would love to meet any of you. August 8th through 10th, thefantasyfootballexpo.com. All right, with that, let's move to the edge losers. And we have a baker's dozen on my list. And at number 13, once again, I talked about this being deep league. So Yetur Gross-Matos is number 13. Mikael Williams is the person that got drafted number 11 by the San Francisco 49ers. That if he's starting at the beginning of the year, I expect they're going to indoctrinate him at some point to the starting lineup as the year progresses, and Gross-Matos will be the one that's impacted by that. I do have concerns about Mikael Williams, though, even though I think he'll be forced in the lineup. You can hear that on my previous post-NFL draft rookie tier show that preceded this one about a week or so ago. Number 12 on the loser list, former first-round pick for the Kansas City Chiefs, Felix Uzama. They re-signed Charles Omenihu. They still have Mike Dana. Of course, they have George Karlaftis, the former number one, but they also drafted Ashton Gillott out of Louisville. Really like Ashton Gillott. Maybe not as tall as you would like, but has some good moves, is a constant hustler. Love the way he plays. Anadike Uzama has not demonstrated the ability to carve out a role with the Chiefs, and as a result, I consider him a loser from the edges, and he's at number 12. Number 11, speaking of former first-round picks, Lucas Van Ness with the Green Bay Packers. Yes, they traded away Preston Smith, but right now I still see Rashawn Gary and Kingsley Inigbar. Sorry if I butchered the name. I'll do that a lot for those that are familiar with me. So Lucas Van Ness is still behind them. In addition, Baron Sorrell was drafted out of the University of Texas, who slipped to the fourth round, but a lot of people were very, very high on him. So I have a feeling Lucas Van Ness could end up fourth on this list as the season progresses. So I have him as my loser, number 11. Number 10, Sam Williams, drafted out of Ole Miss by the Dallas Cowboys. Sustained a knee injury when it looked like it's really coming on. Takes a while to recover from these knee injuries, folks. Everybody doesn't come back at 100% like Adrian Peterson with the Minnesota Vikings did. So Peterson's a freak. Not everybody's a freak. So I expect Williams to struggle somewhat. And of course, falling into the Cowboys' lap in the second round, and they couldn't pass on him. Donovan Izuruku from Boston College, who had double-digit sacks for Boston College, has an array of moves, a little bit on the shorter side, as I talked about in my previous show, long wingspan, long arms, which can help to overcome a little bit of that sharpness, and he has great bend on that pass rush. So I expect him to leapfrog Sam Williams. Sam Williams is a loser for the edges at number 10. At number 9, I have a combo with the Buffalo Bills, AJ Epinesa and Joey Bosa. Of course, first the Bills signed Michael Hoyk from the Rams in free agency. Hoyk gets suspended, just like Larry Ogunjobi did, but they drafted Landon Jackson. So at some point, Hoyt will be back. Then you have Landon Jackson. So Bosa's on a one-year deal. Epinesa only has 1 year left on his contract. I expect both of them to be surpassed and being moved on from, and I expect Hoyt and Landon Jackson to take their roles as we move forward. Now, quick tangent for a second here. When we talk about veterans who are approaching age 30 from a fantasy football perspective, they've been with a team for a while and then they move over to another team. Oftentimes, that's sort of the kiss of death at the beginning of the end. Yeah, they might make it another year or two kind of thing, but usually that is the kiss of death. You see that with a lot of the wide receivers. Yes, they get signed to another deal. The amount they get paid guaranteed is less and less. Think of DeAndre Hopkins with Baltimore, for example, who's jumped from team to team to team. His salary keeps on going down. His productivity keeps on going down as he gets into those early 30s. And so that's what I see happening with Joey Bosa as well. So if you do have him, I'm trying to trade him right now. But also think about that from many of these folks when they start getting to that 29, 30 range. Their team that they've been with for quite a while says, we're not going to re-sign you. Move on. It's time for you to move on from them on your fantasy football teams as well. Okay, back to the regular scheduled program, away from that tangent, although I have another tangent coming up. I'm going to talk about losers number 7 and number 8 together. At number 8, I have Arnold Ebiketie / Leonard Floyd / Braylon Tice from the Atlanta Falcons. Of course, they drafted Jalen Walker and James Pierce. At number 7, I have Zaven Collins. Okay, why am I going to put these together? And it's because of the Jalen Walker factor. If you think about the Cardinals, Zaven Collins and Isaiah Simmons both. Now, different regimes, but still the same type of results from both of these players. They haven't turned into the superstars that people talked about. They were both going to be these multifaceted tools. They were going to be able to play a Mike linebacker role. They're going to be rushed from the edge. Simmons was going to cover slot. In some cases, he could cover big X's, supposedly, from a wide receiver perspective. Turned out these guys were jacks of all trades, but masters of none. And the upside that was expected from Zaven Collins and Isaiah Simmons never materialized. That is my concern with Jalen Walker the more I have thought about it over the past week. And so, yes, I do have Ebiketie and Floyd and Trice as losers tied to Harrison Walker because I still think Walker will get the playing time. Doesn't mean it'll translate to great IDP stats. Similarly with the Cardinals, though, Zaven Collins has never panned out. I don't expect him to pan out to the level we expected. And the Cardinals told us a lot when they, as I talked about with the defensive tackles or interior defensive linemen, when they did the same thing on the edge here, did the Cardinals with signing Josh Sweat free agency, re-signing Baron Browning, who they had traded for, drafting Jordan Birch, BJ Ojulari coming back from injury. Some of the defensive tackles may play on the edge on pass rushing situations because of their capabilities. Walter Nolan could do that, for example. So Zaven Collins, Ebiketie, Floyd, Trice, they're on the loser list at number 7 and 8 combined. And because of the Jalen Walker impact that I want to talk about from a tangent perspective, for y'all to keep in mind, relate to Walker and those folks. Moving on to number 6 on the loser list, Kyle Van Noy. Last year of his contract, he's either 34 going 35 or already 35, somewhere in that range. Last year, been extremely productive as a pass rusher. So for sack-heavy leagues, from a point-scoring perspective, that's phenomenal for Kyle Van Noy, but I expect this to be near the end. In fact, I was watching the NFL live show on ESPN earlier today, and Kyle Van Noy was one of the guest hosts. So it's already as if he is getting prepared for his post-career. So you have Kyle Van Noy in his last year. You have David Ojabo, former number 2 pick from Michigan, who had that big knee injury coming out of college, but they took the chance on him, did Baltimore, hasn't panned out. Adiza Isaac from Penn State, a 3rd-round pick who had injury concerns, who just hasn't gotten past those injury concerns. You have Odafe Owe, who is also in his last year, but I do expect the Ravens to re-sign him. Went through all those folks. Now I'll mention the fact that Mike Green was drafted in the 2nd round. He was drafted because of some of the, quote, off-the-field concerns. But Baltimore supposedly did their due diligence, and with their going through with Justin Tucker, you would hope they did their due diligence if they were going to draft him, given the allegations against Tucker, and then ultimately releasing Tucker this past week as well. So with all that being said, I expect Owe back next year. I expect Green back next year. Isaac will probably be back, but I expect Van Noy and Ojabo to be gone. And I think as the year progresses, you're going to see Mike Green, because he's such a great pass rusher and a great hustler as well. Look at his stats and all, and watch some of his film. I expect him to eventually take over across from Owe. Van Noy becomes more of a situation rusher, maybe even rushing from the inside off-ball linebacker position as a little bit of a blitzer kind of thing. So, but the end is near for Van Noy, Ojabo. Move on from those, losers number 6. At number 5, even with Jadeveon Clowney being released today, and I'm recording this on the night of Thursday, May 8th, for those wondering, DJ Wanham and Patrick Jones Jr., both previous free agents who left Minnesota signing with Carolina, they moved in starting lineup with Jadeveon Clowney being released. But they also drafted Nick Scorton and Princely Umanamalian. I expect that those two over time will both leapfrog those guys. Both of them have done fairly well from a sack perspective, but both of them have done fairly poorly from a pass rush win rate perspective. Expect negative regression as a result on both of those folks, and I do expect the 2 rookies that were drafted to eventually replace those guys, Wanham and Jones. See you later, alligator. They're losers number 5 on my list. At number 4 with the Cincinnati Bengals, Miles Murphy, the former number 1 draft pick, who's who has just not panned out yet. Joseph Osai, who they re-signed on a one-year deal. I do expect Osai to be the who starts. Miles Murphy is just someone they're gonna keep around. They won't pick fifth-year option. After the fourth year, he'll be gone. Even with the Trey Hendrickson situation, they're either going to ask too much that Hendrickson won't be traded, or they're going to continue to ask too much that Hendrickson won't be traded, or they will settle with him somehow for the rest of this 1 year and then he'll become a free agent. But Shamar Stewart, granted, he's got the tools, but he didn't have the true production in terms of results, although he had a ton of pressures. He was in the top 3 or 5 in pressures. I believe that was a SEC number for the record, not a nationwide number. But anyway, I do expect Shamar Stewart will get the opportunity to pass up Osai and Murphy as the year progresses. And of course, as Hendrickson gets traded, no doubt he'll be in there. But Miles Murphy in particular gets buried. Osai gets hurt. Cameron Sample, didn't even mention his name until just a second ago. I don't think he has any chance. So those are losers number 4 at the edge position. Number 3, let's go to the Colts. A combination of Kwity Paye, Samson Ebukam, Taekwon Lewis all fit into the loser category. Yes, Dale Eodeyingbo left, but they drafted JTT out of Ohio State. So for this year, I expect the Colts to continue this horrible rotation that they've had, where a lot of these guys are getting 40, 50, maybe high 50% range in terms of snap count, occasionally getting to the 60s if one of the 5 is injured. But the interesting part of this too is Kwity Paye, Ebukam, and Taekwon Lewis are all in the last years of their contract as well. So I think that bodes well for JTT and Latu as we go into 2026. Unfortunately, this is 2025. So a lot of those guys, or all of those guys, really are losers this year from a Colts edge perspective. Number 2, Kayvon Thibodeaux. Yes, they did pick up his 5th-year option. They also signed Chauncey Golston in free agency. They also obviously drafted the freak Abdul Carter in the NFL draft, did the Giants. But Kayvon Thibodeaux has not had a high pass rush win rate. Once again, this is per PFF. Shout out to PFF when I use their stats. I want to make sure I have recognition for that. I just don't see Kayvon Thibodeaux surviving past this year, and it'll be real interesting. Some of the initial discussion is that Abdul Carter would be moved on the interior for pass rush purposes, leaving Burns and Thibodeaux on the outside. I actually think it's going to be the opposite. I think with Burns will stay on the outside, but the opposite being Thibodeaux will be on the inside in pass rushing situations. Abdul Carter will be the one on the edge because of his bend and speed. Thibodeaux, I think, will get hurt. Thibodeaux is my number 2 loser for edges. All right, my number 1 loser for edge, and this might surprise you all, TJ Watt of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Watt is 30, turning on 31. Let's not lose sight of that. He also has not got an extension yet. The Steelers are probably running to the same situation the Bengals are because Hendrickson is the same situation, 30 turning 31 during the season. These guys probably want a 3 or 4 year deal. But at their age and on the edge, there's no way they're going to have 3 to 4 years of productivity. That is probably the issue of the problem here. Watt has also been very injury prone. Nick Herbig, the backup to both Watt and Highsmith, Alex Highsmith, the edge on the other side for the Steelers, both have shown, Herbig has shown extremely well in his limited playing time and when he has got in when Watt or Highsmith has been injured. So the Steelers probably feel comfortable with that Herbig behind TJ Watt. And then on top of that, very sneakily, they drafted Jack Sawyer in the 4th round. In the Steelers 3-4, Sawyer will, at his weight, will not be one of the 3 down linemen. He will be one of these edge players. And with his motor and his skills and so forth, that was a sneaky pick. I have a feeling TJ Watt is potentially in his last year with the Steelers. If not from a contract perspective, then I also worry about the injuries as well. So that Jack Sawyer pick, along with Herbig, those have me as with TJ Watt as my number 1 edge loser. And as a result of that, folks, I'm looking to trade TJ Watt as quick as I can. All righty, let's move down to the linebacker losers, folks. I have an even dozen in this case. At number 12, I have Mack Wilson and Akeem Davis-Gaither. And it's probably right now more Akeem Davis-Gaither than Mack Wilson. Akeem Davis-Gaither never could leapfrog Jermaine Pratt for the number 2 linebacker role in Cincinnati. The Cardinals allowed Kaiser White to go in free agency. Now, not that Kaiser White is anything special. He was solid. He was a guy who brought us some very good IDP stats. Late number 2, high end number 3 kind of linebacker. Mack Wilson probably fills his role. Akeem Davis-Gaither was probably going to fill the Mack Wilson role. There's a possibility that Cody Simon, as the year progresses, leapfrogs Akeem Davis-Gaither. So it could be Mack Wilson, but I'm thinking it's going to be Akeem Davis-Gaither, at least for this year. As we go into year 2, Cody Simon could move into what was the Kaiser White role, now currently the Mack Wilson role. But Cody Simon used to be a safety, moved to linebacker. He's not the bulkiest of fellas, and on top of that, he struggled in coverage, and one of the reasons Ohio State did move him to linebacker role. Now it's also tied to his leadership and his tackling ability as well, which is great. But don't feel good about the Cardinals with Wilson and Akeem Davis-Gaither right now as we head into this year. At number 11, I generically call this the Rams linebackers. There's Troy Reeder, who they re-signed most of last year for injury, but when he was healthy, he was the number 1 Mike linebacker after they traded away Ernest Jones. They'll have Omar Speights coming back. They signed Nate Landman away from the Falcons. They drafted Chris Paul from Ole Miss. So those are the 4 linebackers. I expect Reeder to be number 1. This is Ricky Rod's prediction on May 8th, subject to change. I expect Omar Speights to be the number 2 linebacker. Nate Landman, yes, he put up decent stats when he got playing time with that Falcons, but he was a restricted free agent that they didn't even feel that he was worth giving him a decent offer, and they just went ahead and released him. Okay, and Chris Poo's his nickname. Sorry about that. And he is a junior, if you want to throw that on top of it. No relation to the basketball players, a side note. But Chris Paul is undersized, went much later in the draft. If you look at how many linebackers went ahead of him, sometimes, once again, the NFL knows a heck of a lot more than we think we do when we're playing fantasy football or just armchair NFL GMs in general. All those linebackers going before Chris Paul says a lot. So I expect Reeder and Speights to start. I think Landman and Paul are the losers here. I have them down at number 11 on my loser list. Okay. Number 10, D. Winters, maybe. So at this point in time with the 49ers, I do expect D. Winters to start for the 49ers next to Fred Warner in that and of course, Winters would be taking on that old Dre Greenlaw role as he did for a chunk of the last year after Devondre Campbell had his hissy fit on the sideline and basically quit. They drafted Nick Martin in the 3rd round, which was a shock to everybody. Now in 2023, Nick Martin was a tackling machine with over 100 tackles, several tackles for loss sacks. But he is on the smaller side, and he did have an injury in 2024 where he missed, I believe it was 6 games. A lot of the people, and I'm not going to call myself a scouting guru or expert by any means, but a lot of analysts out there had Nick Martin as like a 7th round type of pick, potentially even an undrafted free agent. And here's the 49ers picking him in the 3rd round. Now, he did have good measurables with this 40 and so forth, running the 4.5s. But boy, this feels like one of those, taking a bet, and he's on that speed and not necessarily the overall package. Not feeling great about Nick Martin, but because of the draft capital, I am going to put D. Winters here on the loser list at number 10. If Winters does lose his job, I don't think it's in 2025. I think it happens in 2026. Okay. At number 9 for the linebacker losers, Trenton Simpson with the Baltimore Ravens. So we go into the offseason. The Ravens lose Malik Harrison via free agency over to the Steelers. They lose Chris Board in free agency. The door's wide open for Trenton Simpson to potentially once again start next to Roquan Smith with the Ravens. A high productive spot which Patrick Queen previously occupied and did really well. Got a great contract from the Steelers out of it. Head coach John Harbaugh even said that Simpson is going to have an opportunity as we move to the next year to take that role next to Roquan Smith back over. What do the Ravens do? They draft Teddy Buchanan out of California. Now, once again, not really overly sold on Buchanan per se, but I don't see Trenton Simpson as a huge impediment to him taking that role. The linebackers in general, from a rookie perspective, I have to admit, other than a couple at the top, which go back and listen to my show from last week, and when I talked through the tiers and where I hit on the linebackers, and you can hear more about that. But you hear that for the most part, I'm not a huge fan of a lot of these linebackers. But because of the draft capital they gave Buchanan and because of how Simpson performed last year, and it wasn't like he was a rookie last year, I do expect that Buchanan will leapfrog Simpson and be the starter. So Trenton Simpson, number 9 loser. And number 8, Drew Tranquill, Kansas City Chiefs. Another rookie I'm not a huge fan of, but another former safety, Jeffrey Bassa out of Oregon, who got moved down to the linebacker spot. I think he's a year away. Tranquill happens to be on the last year of his contract. I expect in 2026, Tranquill will be playing somewhere else. Jeffrey Bassa will be your weak side linebacker, your number 2 linebacker next to Nick Bolton with the Kansas City Chiefs. At number 7, losers. From the Denver Broncos, Justin Sternard and Drew Sanders. Drew Sanders, I had high hopes for. Justin Sternard got a lot of playing time, but really his best position is special teams, to be honest, folks. So Dre Greenlaw, we signed in free agency. We knew that. But the reason I have these guys post NFL draft wasn't necessarily because of a rookie that the Broncos drafted, but because it came out after the draft at Alex Singleton. Granted, he's 32 years old, coming back from that ACL injury, knee injury that he suffered early last year, early in 2024 season. I expect Singleton to move into that starting lineup, so that bumps both Sternard and Sanders out of that. And so that's why, even though there's no rookies, I have them at number 7 on the linebacker losers list. At number 6, Pete Werner from the New Orleans Saints. Yes, they signed him to a 3-year extension last year, which just befuddles the heck out of me as a Saints fan. Didn't make any sense with his tackling problems. His coverage problems got worse and worse as time is going on instead of better and better. And then they go ahead and draft Danny Stutzman. Now, the thing I like about Stutzman is he's a great tackler, which Werner has struggled with. Problem with Stutzman is at Oklahoma, he struggled in coverage. Saints are transitioning from a 4-3 to more of a 3-4. Now they do with Brandon Staley, the new DC, former Rams DC, former head coach in DC for the Chargers. Staley did use 3-4 and some 4-3 as well. But I think this could bail Mickey Loomis out from looking bad from that bad extension. He can argue Brandon Staley's new 3-4 defense isn't a great fit for Pete Werner. Stutzman jumps into that role, and Werner can eventually, move on. I think the poor tackling is going to allow Stutzman as this year progresses to overtake Pete Werner. Pete Werner, number 6 on my loser list for linebackers. At number 5, Nakobe Dean for the Eagles. Problem number 1 is that he has a late season in the playoffs knee injury, which will put him out for the majority of 2025. At least that's what anticipated at this point. Number 2, the Eagles were desperately trying to trade up multiple spots, finally only trade up one spot to draft Jahad Campbell out of Alabama. Now, Jahad Campbell, similar to that Jalen Walker conversation, capable of playing the inside linebacker role, capable of playing the edge. He's also has a lot of injury concerns as well. He's coming off shoulder/labrum surgery. There's talk he might have issues with his other shoulder. There's talk he might have other problems with his knees as well. Some teams apparently even took them off their boards because of his injury situation. They did that with Campbell. However, the Eagles had no concern. They were trying to, with his injury history, they were trying to trade up for him. They did snatch him. They said that he was top 10 on their board, and when he kept falling, that's why they were trying to trade up. They only had to trade up one spot and give up a fifth rounder to get him. They're thrilled to have him in the post-draft, forget what they call it, post-draft mini camp or whatever the thing is called. They actually had him with the inside linebackers, which I think bodes well for him from a rookie perspective, not so good for Nakobe Dean. Now, the risk is 2 years from now, Nakobe Dean's back, the Jihad Campbell gets moved to edge position. So back to the host, Savin Collins, Jalen Walker, it's Isaiah Simmons discussion. Just keep that in mind about Jihad Campbell, not to mention his injury concerns if you're in your rookie drafts right now. But in the short term, at least, Nakobe Dean is a loser at number 5 for IDP's linebackers. Number 4, Devin Lloyd with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Item number 1, the Jaguars do not pick up Devin Lloyd's fifth-year option, even though supposedly he had the highest positional rating for the Jaguars in terms of how well he performed. Problem number 2, they drafted Jack Kaiser. There's a new regime in place, new head coach, new offensive and defensive coordinators, Cohen's with offensive coordinator as well. But all of this signals really bad for Devin Lloyd. I expect Devin Lloyd to be in a different uniform next year. He can be productive in those uniforms, that different uniform next year. I don't expect Kaiser to leapfrog him this year either, unless Jacksonville's record is so bad that they decide to start giving other players opportunities for the future. And I don't expect that to happen, by the way. But if that does happen, then Kaiser will get playing time late in the year, and I think it would be at the expense of Devin Lloyd. So Devin Lloyd, in terms of where he'll be in the future, the risk for later this year if the Jaguars struggle, number 4 on my loser list. Number 3, you might have heard about this guy from a positive perspective by the name of Carson Schwarzenegger, who the Browns picked with the first pick of the second round of the NFL rookie draft this year, and expect him to come in right away and start for the Browns. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, still, we have not heard anything positive about his recovery and his ability to play this year. So he is a loser for the Browns. Jordan Hicks, now well into his 30s and being injury prone, not a good sign. Devin Bush, who actually performed fairly well according to PFF stats in the playing time he did have with the Browns, he decided to get arrested for assault. They signed Jerome Baker in free agency, but he's just a guy. And I can go on. So it's clear the Browns wanted to deal with, or needed to deal with the Browns with their linebacker situation in the Browns. They had to deal with it. Sorry about that. Carson Schwarzenegger is part of the puzzle of solving that. He is the number 1 linebacker. All these other guys we've fighting for the number 2 spot, expect Hicks to get released actually. And as a result, all those other Browns linebackers are on the loser list at number 3. At number 2 for the Cincinnati Bengals, Jermaine Pratt and Oren Burks with a reprieve. And what I mean by with a reprieve is Jermaine Pratt asked for a trade that hasn't happened yet. Supposedly his agent asked for a release. That hasn't happened yet. As long as those 2 things haven't happened, Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt are your starters for the Bengals. Okay? If he does get released or traded at some point, but more likely it would be released as opposed to traded, as we've gotten through the NFL draft, and there's still other linebacker free agents such as a Kaiser White. So given that, I'm not sure where Pratt would land and would he get a substantial role if he does get released. If the Bengals do struggle and knowing that Pratt is in the last year of his deal, Demetrius Knight, who they drafted, who is, by the way, 25 years old, for those of you in Dynasty rookie drafts, as a side note, I forgot to mention that in my broadcast last week. but it's 25. And then they also drafted Barrett Carter. So they drafted 2 linebackers. Logan Wilson signed an extension that goes into, I believe, 2028, if I remember correctly. So he's not going anywhere anytime soon. I know Oren Burks signed with the Bengals, hoping to capitalize on his play in the playoffs with the Eagles. But Pratt and Burks, I think, are in serious trouble for Knight and Carter, particularly if the Bengals defense struggles overall. Of course, they do have a new defensive coordinator coming in, Al Golden, so you can't assume the same usage as well, the same schemes as they had under their previous defensive coordinator, who they fired with Golden coming in. So this is going to be really interesting. But right now, my gut says Pratt and Burks are in trouble. Overall, they're number 2 on my loser list for the Bengals and for the linebacker position. Number 1, another one that might surprise you, similar to maybe TJ Watt and Christian Wilkins on the previous one, and that is Tremaine Edmonds is my linebacker 1 loser. Why do you say that, Ricky? Well, TJ Edwards, who signed along with Tremaine Edmonds in free agency together with the Bears a couple years back, Edwards ended up getting an extension. There's been no word or no discussion about an extension for Tremaine Edmonds. But TJ Edwards got one. But Kyler Gordon got one. DJ Moore got one last season. So there's been several people that Jalen Johnson got one last. So the Bears have been signing a lot of people to these extensions. Tremaine Edmonds is not one of them. On top of that, once again, another one of these folks that people consider as a reach, Ruben Hippolyte II, who, once again, all the draft people that study all the film and blah, 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 had Hippolyte as a late round draft pick / 100 free agent in many cases. But yet the Bears picked him in I believe it was the 4th round. I forgot to put that in my notes, sorry. But I believe it was the 4th round, maybe it was the 5th round. But anyway, I just see Brian Poles making, in his mind, having Hippolyte as a replacement for Edmonds. And so, and Edmonds, while he got the big contract when he left Buffalo, there's a reason Buffalo is willing to let him go. While he did put up good counting stats, his grades from a PFF perspective weren't good. I think the Bears are figuring that out as well. He's got some great athletic capabilities, can't hustle, run around, make tackles, blah, 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 but he's not the kind of full-time player that they want in that role. I think Tremaine Edmonds is a loser here, and he is the number 1 loser from the linebacker position. All right, let's move on to cornerbacks, folks. And I'm probably going to go through cornerbacks a little bit faster because we are talking from an IDP fantasy football perspective. And cornerbacks, a lot of leagues, even though I tend to talk about deep leagues, a lot of leagues don't use nearly as many cornerbacks. So real fast, Jalen Watson. I have 9 cornerback losers, and Jalen Watson is at number 9. The Chiefs signed Christian Fulton free agency. Noah Williams fell to the 3rd round, a great steal for them in the cornerback position. So both of those guys can play on the outside. That bumps Jalen Watson out. You might say, Ricky, Trent McDuffie, isn't this good news for him? And I'm going to say, as-a-freaking-lutely. I think what happens when McDuffie is he starts on the outside with Christian Fulton. When teams go to 3 wide, McDuffie moves back into the slot where he was so darn productive. And if Williams can hold down the fort, maybe McDuffie goes full time into the slot. McDuffie will be on the field somehow 97% of the snaps every game. But this is great news for McDuffie with the signing of Fulton and the drafting of Williams. Really bad for Jalen Watson. At number 8 for cornerback losers, Noah Igbenogany from the Washington Commanders. Great news for Mike Sanders still. He's on the winner cornerback list, just like Trent McDuffie. The Commanders draft Trey Amos to play that outside cornerback role that Sanders still was forced to play last year. This will move Sanders still to his more natural position of slot, which is great news from his IDP productivity perspective, which was very good as outside corner, now even better as a slot corner. But that's Igbenogany's spot. Igbenogany, number 8 loser at cornerback. Number 7, let's go to the Falcons. It looked good for Clark Phillips when the Falcons did not re-sign D. Alford, who was the slot corner last year. Clark Phillips was 3rd round pick the year before. It looked like he was destined to start. Then what do the Falcons do? They re-signed D. Alford, and they drafted Billy Bowman Jr. with the defensive coordinator supposedly, quote, pounding the table for the Falcons to go and get Billy Bowman Jr. out of Oklahoma, who was a safety, but they actually plan on starting him in the nickel position. So Clark Phillips, who at one point we thought, ooh, man, slot starting cornerback for the Falcons, when they play three wide teams, this could be a great situation for Phillips. Not anymore. He is number 7 on the loser list. Number 6, Jamel Dean from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's had his share of productivity, his willingness to tackle, his interceptions as an outside cornerback has Jamel Dean, but um, Zion McCollum became a starter last year. They drafted Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame, who fell a little bit further than he should have just because of injuries last year. They drafted Jacob Parrish out of, I believe it was Kansas State, not Kansas. I think it's one of those two. I think it's Kansas State, who can end up being a slot corner as well. I just think all this means that Jamel Dean is going to be a cap casualty at some point. He's also very injury prone as well. You can see they're making plans to move on from him. Jamel Dean, loser number 6 at cornerbacks. Number 5, Ugo Amadi from the Saints. Loved when, not because of we don't love it when people get injured, but love the fact that Ugo Amadi got the chance to play that slot cornerback position for the Saints and was very productive when he took over that role from an IDP perspective uh, for our fantasy football teams. However, Dennis Allen is no longer the defensive coordinator there. Brandon Staley is. He uses a different type of scheme. On top of that, the Saints drafted Quincy Riley and they signed Isaac Yiadom, who used to play for the Saints, went to the 49ers and did okay with the 49ers, is now back with the Saints. So, given all these ads, I don't think Amadi gets the playing time. And once again, he wasn't exactly one of the first people the Saints signed in free agency. And on top of that, they went and signed Justin Reed as a safety as well, adding to that defensive backfield. And they drafted Giannis Sanker from Virginia, or is it Virginia Tech? One of those two. Sorry about that. The Saints. So there's all these new pieces in the Saints secondary. Ugo Amadi, as productive as he was late last year, he is our number 5 loser from a cornerback position. Number 4, Jalen Jones from the Colts. He's an outside corner, but he's one of those outside cornerbacks that we love, that he's just barely enough to play above anybody else that they had on the bench, but he's not great at all that other opposing teams just target him and target him and target him. And to his credit, he got a lot of interceptions, got a lot of tackles, got a lot of pass defenses. But what happened? The Colts added Charvarius Ward. They have Kenny Moore. They have Juju Brents, the number 2 second round draft pick from previous years, coming back from injury. Those 3 are going to be your starting top 3 cornerbacks for the Colts. Jalen Jones goes to the bench as a number 4. Jalen Jones, our number 4 loser for cornerbacks. At number 2 and number 3, combining these two, Keyshawn Nixon and Nate Hobbs. Nate Hobbs was signed by the Packers in free agency away from the Raiders. We loved when Hobbs was healthy, and we loved when Hobbs was healthy and playing in the slot for the Raiders. He was a very productive IDP cornerback. The Packers signed him, and it appeared right away that he was going to be the slot cornerback for the Packers. Now, that pushes Keyshawn Nixon to a boundary cornerback, which is bad news for Keyshawn Nixon. Then what happens further? Jair Alexander, the discussion is they're going to trade him or they're going to release him. They're going to trade him or release him. Well, maybe they're going to keep him now. Not sure what's going to happen, but even if he stays, he is very injury prone. My gut tells me is that Alexander either leaves or gets hurt yet again. Keyshawn Nixon and Nate Hobbs end up on the boundaries. Javon Bullard, the safety out of Georgia, who got used both in the slot and in the safety positions last year, ends up playing more of that slot / nickel role. And that's bad news for both Nixon and Hobbs. So I have them tied for number 2 and number 3 in terms of biggest losers at the cornerback position. You could have argued they're at the top of the list, but the one I have at the top of the list is Jaquan McMillan for the Denver Broncos. The Broncos drafted Jahdae Barron out of the University of Texas with the 20th overall pick, maybe the 21st overall pick this year. A lot of people expect him to go running back. Some people expect him to go wide receiver, but they pick this very versatile defensive back piece in Jahdae Barron, who played outside cornerback somewhat, played slot, who has played the safety positions. Right now, they expect most of his run to be in the slot position. But Riley Moss really did struggle in the second half of the year. So this could be one of these situations, similarly like we were talking about with the Packers, where Barron and Surtain are starting at outside boundary corners. When the other team go to three wide, Barron moves inside, Riley moves to the inside to the slot. Riley Moss comes to the outside. So that's one thing that could happen. The other thing I'm a little bit worried about is actually Brandon Jones. I don't think this happens, but I want you all to just be aware of it and keep it in mind. First, the Broncos go and sign Talanoa Hufanga in free agency from the 49ers, who we expected to start next to Brandon Jones. Could this be a situation where the Broncos are actually happier than I think they are with Riley Moss, and Barron actually plays some of that Brandon Jones role next to Hufanga, and then maybe Jones comes in passing situations or three wide, and then that's when Barron maybe goes down to the slot. I worry about that. I think that's a very low probability, but it is a possibility. It's something to keep in mind if you're a Brandon Jones owner. But right now, I think the biggest hit overall is to Jaquan McMillan first, Riley Moss second. That is the number one loser from the Broncos cornerbacks position. From the Broncos cornerbacks, that's my number one losers for the cornerback position. All righty, we've hit DT/interior defensive line. We've hit edge. We've hit the Mike/inside linebackers. We've hit cornerbacks. We are down to the safety position, folks, and I have 9 there. And the first one with the Carolina Panthers, Damani Richardson. So Trevin Moehrig gets signed in free agency by the Panthers away from the Raiders. Damani Richardson was starting last year as an undrafted free agent after Texas A&M. You always have to keep some of this draft capital in mind, folks. And what do the Panthers do? They draft Lathan Ransom out of Ohio State. Lathan Ransom is known as a big hitter, a really solid tackler, not known necessarily for his coverage. Moehrig is for actually being able to play deep. Yes, he can play closer to the line, but he can also be successful deep. Do the Panthers end up playing a little bit more single high with Ransom playing more towards the box, which would make Ransom a winner, by the way? But what that means is Damani Richardson, with his UDFA, meaning no draft capital as an undrafted free agent, I think he's a loser here at number 9, with Ransom taking that spot. At number 8, the Atlanta Falcons, Jordan Fuller. Fuller leaves the Panthers, signs with the Falcons. Of course, Justin Simmons is still a free agent. The Falcons haven't attempted to re-sign him at all. Richie Grant, the former second-round pick of the Atlanta Falcons, he leaves in free agency. So big hole at safety. Jordan Fuller signs, right? Well, the problem is Xavier Watts gets drafted by the Falcons, and Billy Bowman Jr., who I mentioned who I mentioned earlier, also got drafted by the Falcons. So that's bad news for Jordan Fuller. I expect Xavier Watts to step into the starting lineup immediately with his tackling capability, with his ball hawking capability. And this could be a situation a year from now. Jesse Bates is also gone, and your starting safeties are Watts and Bowman. But for this year, Jordan Fuller, loser number 8 at the safety position. Loser number 7, Tony Adams from the New York Jets. The Jets went out and signed Andre Cisco, which was interesting, and I talked about that on a previous show where I was really surprised by it because Cisco couldn't hold a starting safety position with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Maybe there's something they liked about him. Maybe they're going to use him differently than how the Jaguars used him, etc. Tony Adams is really the only safety that's coming back for the Jets from last year. I'm not going to include Jared Bernard Converse as an example, or Isaiah Oliver, who I expect to play at a cornerback position. So with Adams the only one coming back, it looked like Adams and Cisco will be the starting safeties for the Jets. But then the Jets draft Malachi Moore, who's a former Alabama player who plays like Brian Branch, who had the position versatility similar to Brian Branch, not as good as Brian Branch, but similar styles. Apparently, Aaron Glenn, the new head coach of the Jets, also talked to Brian Branch to get feedback on Malachi Moore. So expect your starting safeties, particularly if you go out in free agency and you sign someone like Cisco, and it wasn't a minimum contract from a salary perspective. Expect Cisco and Malachi Moore to be your eventual starting safeties for the Jets, which makes Tony Adams loser number 7 at the safety position. At number 6, Xavier Woods with the Tennessee Titans. Amani Hooker and Xavier Woods, who was signed away in free agency away from those Carolina Panthers. I should have mentioned that when I was talking about the Panthers a little bit earlier. Woods left them in free agency. Now, Woods is going on 30, which I went and double checked that, which I was surprised because I thought he was starting to get older. I didn't realize he was going on 30 this year. So expect him to be a 1-year starter there. And if Tennessee's season doesn't go as well with a rookie quarterback, Kevin Winston Jr., I expect will get playing time in Xavier Woods' spot if Tennessee's season goes into the tank and as the year progresses. I don't expect Xavier Woods to be with Tennessee beyond this year. Xavier Woods is a loser. He's one of those, remember that Joey Bosa discussion I had earlier? This could be near the end for Xavier Woods. At number 5, from the Baltimore Ravens, are Darius Washington. Now, from a winner perspective, a huge winner, at least Ricky Rod's predicting on May 8th, is Kyle Hamilton. Or Darius Washington is a loser because of the drafting of Malachi Starks. Malachi Starks, I think, will be most effective playing that deep safety where they had to move Kyle Hamilton to because Marcus Williams was failing back there. They didn't have anybody else back there. Really hurt Kyle Hamilton from an IDP stats and productivity perspective. Our Darius Washington benefited. But with Stark's capabilities, and I think his best position is probably playing that deep safety role, thing that pushes Hamilton back towards the line, which is great for their defensive coordinator or for those that don't know who that is. He's a defense coordinator for the Ravens. Thing that pushes Darius Washington aside. So I think it's great for Kyle Hamilton, bad for Darius Washington, bad for Malachi Starks as well as a note. So that's my number 5 loser for the safeties, Darius Washington. At number 4, Jordan Whitehead for Tampa Bay. Now, some might be saying, well, wait, the Buccaneers didn't draft any safeties. That is correct, but here's what I think is going to happen. I talked about Benjamin Morrison and Jacob Parrish a little bit earlier when I was talking about the cornerbacks. Tyke Smith was one of these combo safeties / slot folks who got very good playing time at at the slot last year. He did have a little bit of injury concerns during the year, but I think what will happen is Tyke Smith will move to the safety position and start with Winfield. And I think that gives them more flexibility than they had with Whitehead. I think Jacob Parrish eventually takes over that slot cornerback position with Morrison on the outside with whether it be Dean or McCullum, whatever. So I think that's what happens. Maybe not to start the year, but I think shortly after the year starts, I think that's how it plays out. I think that's really bad news for Jordan Whitehead. And I think it's really good news for Tyke Smith, particularly if he maintains cornerback eligibility playing at safety. So Jordan Whitehead, number 4 loser from a safety perspective. Number 3, Darnell Savage with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I still have no idea why they gave him the contract they did last year in free agency, they being the Jacksonville Jaguars. Of course, there's a new regime. Now, I don't know why the new regime gave Eric Murray the 3-year contract that they did free agency this year from the Houston Texans, but they did. They also drafted Caleb Ransaw, who played cornerback mostly and played some slot at Tulane. And with his size, he was going to be probably more of a slot cornerback. At least that's what we expected coming out of the draft. However, the word since the draft is Caleb Ransaw is going to move to safety. New regime, draft capital for Ransaw, sign Murray as a free agency. This is bad news for Darnell Savage. Darnell Savage, my number 3 loser at safety. Number 2 might not be to start the year, but with the Philadelphia Eagles, Sidney Brown. I think Sidney Brown, not Tristan McCullum, will be the starting safety next to Reed Blankenship for the Philadelphia Eagles. Of course, they traded away Chauncey Gardner-Johnson to the Houston Texans. I think Brown, with his previous draft capital, with him being another year recovered from that knee injury he had, gets the starting position next to Blankenship. However, the Eagles did draft Andrew Makuba with some out of Texas with some very high draft capital. So I think Brown holds the starting position for a period of time. Makuba could potentially leapfrog him this year. Even if he doesn't, I think year 2 he will. And I think the Eagles probably even bring somebody else. Blankenship is a free agent after this year. I think Makuba and somebody else are the starting safeties for the Eagles in 2026. I think he eventually takes over for Brown as the 2025 season progresses. So Sidney Brown, and you can throw Tristan McCullum in there, my number 2 losers for the Eagles safeties, or for the safeties from the Eagles. Number 1, Kobe Bryant with the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks draft Nick Emmanwori. If they use him, and they being the Seahawks coaching staff, and Mike McDonald, who was the former DC of the Baltimore Ravens, who used Kyle Hamilton in very productive ways as an IDP close to the box and in the and near the line of scrimmage, that bodes great news for Nick Emmanwori. What that means is I see Emmanwori starting, Julian Love being the number 2 safety, bumping Kobe Bryant to the bench. I think that's how it ends up playing out. Now, are there packages potentially where there's 3 safeties and actually Kobe Bryant is in there? Yes, I do see that happening, but I don't see Kobe Bryant as a starting safety. Remember, he was a cornerback who was a strong cornerback that they moved to safety, who, yes, he did do a nice job. He did get a lot of interceptions. That's what propelled his IDP stats. But interceptions are not highly repeatable when you have outliers like that, like he had, or at least I feel that he had. You don't expect to repeat year over year. Think about Deron Bland. Think about Trayvon Diggs as example. It's similar to touchdowns where someone has an outrageous number of touchdowns, like Terry McLaurin had for a second this past year. Um, expect those to regress. So expect McLaurin's touchdowns to regress. Expect James Cook's touchdowns to regress. Expect Kobe Bryant's interceptions to regress, particularly with less time. So there you have it. For all 5 positions from a true IDP position perspective, as they call it these days, those are your losers across all the positions, according to Ricky Rod. Those are your veteran losers post the NFL draft. All righty, let's quickly talk about some upcoming shows, folks. I'm considering also doing a post NFL draft IDP veteran winners show, but the winners seem to be so obvious in a lot of cases versus the losers. Really, the reason I focused on losers on this show, I may or may not do that one. I may go straight into the shows that I really want to do, which is from an IDP perspective, which players will ascend into the top 24 by position and which ones will fall out of the top 24 by position. And then do the same with offense. And Sean T at Sean8386, who some of you will remember from the start shows with IDP Plus with me. He'll be joining me for these shows, and I'm really excited to do those with Sean. So those are the upcoming shows that you can look forward to. As always, if you like this show, please give me a thumbs up on YouTube. If you have comments, questions, suggestions, please put them into the YouTube channel with this show, and I will do my best to answer them. I think I've answered all of them, except I think I missed one, and it was so many weeks later that I missed it, and I apologize. But I tend to try and answer all the comments and respond to all the questions. So do that. Give me a follow on Ricky Rod 66 on X. You can, of course, on the IDP Plus YouTube channel, catch the replay of this show and all my other shows and all the other IDP Plus shows. And there's a lot of great shows out there for you to watch. Go watch the Axeman. Go watch Offensive Points as a couple of examples. Some great shows there. And once again, quick reminders, Fast Draft app, $50 up to a $50 match with the code PLUS, PLUS, idpplus.com, great website, content, tools, rankings, articles, Discord, you name it, great site. TheFantasyFootballExpo.com, August 8th through 10th in Canton, Ohio. Come meet me and so many others in the industry. Come meet so many fans. There's some terrific fan packages. Great way to meet a lot of people. Great way to get involved in the industry or meet new friends that you can stay in touch with technology. It's fantastic. And with that, we'll see you in about another week or so. This is Ricky Roderick wishing you, your family, and your friends great health and happiness. Be kind to one another, folks. And I'm out of here, and we will catch you next time.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.